What if I told you the greatest yogi in Tibet was trained by a man who, some accounts say, made him build and destroy a tower not once, not twice, but as many as 12 times? Here's what you're about to witness: bleeding hands, broken dreams, and a teacher who smiles while watching you demolish months of work with your bare hands. Start over, he says. This time make it perfect. This isn't your peaceful meditation retreat. This is Marpa the translator, the farmer mystic who brought esoteric teachings from India and turned spiritual training into the ultimate test of human endurance. Today we meet the teacher who believed the only way to save a killer's soul was to break everything else first. Can you shatter someone so completely that enlightenment grows from the pieces? Welcome back to Buddha's Wisdom. I'm Matt, and we're continuing the wildest redemption story in Buddhist history. And here's the crazy part. So many of you have been asking, can someone who's done terrible things actually change? Well, you're about to get your answer. Last episode ended with MILAREPA standing in the ruins of his magical revenge. 35 wedding guests dead. His sister asking, "What have you become?" He'd discovered the answer: a monster who needed to die before anything good could be born. Remember our Monkey King series? Sun Wukong's ego was massive, but at least he didn't murder entire families. MILAREPA's transformation required something way more extreme than breathing exercises and positive thinking. He needed a teacher willing to destroy him, and get this, he found one. Over the next 25 minutes, you'll witness spiritual training that makes any modern military training look gentle by comparison. We're talking years of manual labor that wrecks your body, cave meditation that literally turns you green, and a final demon battle that could kill you. But here's what makes this absolutely insane. It actually works. By the end, you'll see whether someone who's committed mass murder can actually claw their way back to the light. The method, more suffering than you can imagine. After the massacre, MILAREPA wandered Tibet's mountains for months, carrying guilt that felt heavier than stone, searching for someone who could teach him to undo what he'd done. Local monks took one look at this pale, haunted figure and slammed their monastery doors. Nobody wanted the wedding killer as a student. Then he heard stories about Marpa the translator, and this guy's backstory is absolutely wild. Accounts describe him as stocky and bearded, with a booming laugh and farmer's hands. More villager than mystic. But those deep-set, intense eyes seem to see straight through your soul. Now imagine this farmer hearing about incredible Buddhist teachings available in India. But getting there means crossing mountain passes that locals call Death's Gateway, walking through territories controlled by hostile armies, and somehow surviving months of travel that would kill most people. Most sane individuals would say, forget it. Marpa said, I'm going anyway. 3 times. 3 separate expeditions to India, each time collecting more advanced tantric practices than most Tibetans would ever see. Secret teachings from masters who only shared them with their closest disciples. Then he'd return to his valley and go back to farming barley like he'd been on vacation. When MILAREPA finally found him, Marpa was plowing a field in the Lodrak Valley, cursing at stubborn oxen, covered in mud, looking like any frustrated farmer. This was the man who would transform a killer into someone later known as Jetson MILAREPA, Venerable Master MILAREPA, one of Tibet's greatest yogis. Are you the great teacher Marpa? MILAREPA asked nervously. Marpa stopped, looked at this desperate young man with haunted eyes, and burst out laughing. Teacher? I'm trying to plant barley before winter kills everything. You want the master? He's probably drinking tea up at the house. I'm nobody special. Can you imagine the confusion? You're expecting some mystical guru on a throne, and instead you get a farmer who pretends he's never heard of himself. For hours, Marpa played this game, fed MILAREPA dinner, listened to his confession about mass murder and black magic, all while acting like he had no idea where this famous teacher might be hiding. And here's the thing, this wasn't cruelty. This was testing. Real masters don't accept students immediately. They check for desperation, humility, willingness to be treated like dirt if that's what transformation requires. When Marpa finally revealed his identity, Milarepa collapsed and begged to become a student. "I've killed 35 innocent people with sorcery," he confessed. "I need Dharma teachings to purify this karma. I'll do anything you ask." Marpa studied this broken young man, then quoted something his own teacher Naropa had told him in the caves of India. "The Dharma is not bought with gold, but with the marrow of your bones." Then he smiled in a way that should have terrified Milarepa. "Perfect. I specialize in hopeless cases, but understand this. My methods will make your sorcery training look like a pleasant afternoon." Milarepa nodded eagerly. He had no idea he'd signed up for years of torture. Because Marpa wasn't planning to teach him Buddhism, he was planning to kill everything Milarepa thought he was. "Build me a tower," Marpa said the next morning, handing Milarepa a pile of stones. 9 stories tall, perfect stonework, no help from anyone. Milarepa thought this was symbolic, some kind of patience lesson before getting real teachings. He was dead wrong. Marpa literally wanted a tower. For months, Milarepa hauled stones up that hill. Each rock had to be shaped by hand, every level precisely aligned. His hands split and bled from the rough granite. His back screamed constantly. Ever had a boss who made impossible demands? Marpa made them look merciful. The other students watched with growing concern. A young monk named Soltrim whispered to his friend, "This isn't spiritual training. This is punishment for a crime we don't understand." Slowly, painfully, a magnificent 9-story tower rose from the hillside, architectural masterpiece, something that would stand for generations. When Milarepa placed the final stone, exhausted but genuinely proud, he ran to get Marpa. "Master, come see what I've built." Marpa climbed the hill like a building inspector, examined every level with infuriating attention to detail, walked around the structure 3 times, then nodded thoughtfully. "Interesting work," he said. "Now tear it down." Milarepa stared. "I'm sorry, what?" "Tear it down, every stone. The foundation was wrong from the beginning. Start over." Pause and think about this for a second. You've poured months of your life into something beautiful, and your teacher casually tells you to demolish it because of some technical flaw you never understood. Most people would quit, storm off, demand an explanation. But Milarepa remembered the 35 wedding guests he'd murdered. Maybe he deserved exactly this kind of meaningless torment. The sound of stones crashing down the hillside echoed through the valley like thunder. Other students winced with each impact. Tower number 2 took even longer, better materials, flawless construction. "Good work," Marpa said after his inspection. "Now tear it down. These stones are the wrong color." And here's where it gets insane. Traditional accounts vary, but some sources say this happened not once, not twice, but tower after tower after tower. Each one more perfect than the last, each demolition more devastating. After demolishing what might have been his 7th attempt, Milarepa finally broke down sobbing. That's when Marpa did something unexpected. He sat down next to his student, and for a moment, his farmer's mask slipped away. "You think I'm being cruel," he said quietly, "but look at your hands." Milarepa looked. The scars told a story. Months of suffering. Years of dedication. "Those hands once summoned death with magic," Marpa continued. "Now they create beauty from stone. That's karma in action, the same hands that caused suffering now carving the path to awakening." For the first time, Milarepa began to understand. This wasn't punishment. This was surgery, removing the spiritual disease that had created a killer. Every tower represented everything Milarepa thought he deserved. Every demolition taught him that he deserved nothing. The person who had learned sorcery for revenge, who had demanded justice through violence, that person was dying one demolished tower at a time. After years of tower building had shattered every expectation, Marpa finally spoke the words Milarepa had been desperately waiting for. "You're ready for meditation instruction." He handed Milarepa a worn scroll covered in Sanskrit text. "Advanced practices for working with subtle energy. techniques for recognizing the nature of consciousness itself, methods that normally required constant guidance. Go to that cave. Don't come out until you've mastered everything written here. The cave was barely large enough for one person, cold as winter night, dark as the bottom of a well, so isolated that even bird songs couldn't reach inside. How long should I stay? MILAREPA asked. Until you're done, Marpa replied. 3 years. 3 years in what felt more like a tomb than a meditation hall. The food Marpa provided? Just enough barley flour to avoid starvation. When even that ran out, MILAREPA faced a choice. Leave the cave and admit failure, or find another way to survive. The mountains were covered in stinging nettles. Touching them felt like being burned alive. Eating them was torture. The bitter taste would make you vomit, but they would keep you alive. For months, then years, MILAREPA survived on nothing except these cursed weeds. And here's where it gets absolutely wild. The transformation was horrifying. His body wasted away until every bone showed through paper-thin skin. The chlorophyll turned him green. Skin, hair, even his nails. When villagers occasionally glimpsed this skeletal green figure moving through the forest like a ghost, children ran screaming to their mothers. Adults whispered protection mantras and made signs against evil spirits. They thought they were seeing a hungry ghost, a spirit of someone who had died with terrible karma and couldn't find peace. In a way, they were absolutely right. But something incredible was happening inside that cave. His meditation deepened as his body disappeared, with nowhere to go, nothing to distract him, no comfort to cling to. His consciousness had no choice except to expand beyond normal human limitations. The guilt over 35 murders was dissolving like salt in water, not because he'd forgotten what he'd done, but because the he who had committed those crimes was starving to death in that cave. During the deepest meditation states, when the boundary between his mind and infinite space began dissolving completely, MILAREPA experienced something that would later become one of his most famous songs. I have no food, I have no clothes, but I am rich in the Dharma. The person who had demanded material justice was learning to find wealth in emptiness itself. When he finally emerged after 3 years, skeletal and green as a mountain spirit, even his own reflection in streams looked alien and frightening. The killer was almost dead. What would replace him remained to be seen. But the final test was coming. One person couldn't stand watching this gradual destruction. Dagmema, Marpa's wife, had witnessed the scarred hands from tower building, the growing desperation. Now she occasionally glimpsed this green skeletal figure during his rare appearances, and her heart shattered. This has gone too far, she told Marpa one evening as they sat by their fire. That boy is dying up there. Good, Marpa replied without looking up from his tea. The boy who killed 35 people needs to die. Some versions of the story say Dagmema secretly helped MILAREPA during these cave years. Others claim she simply begged her husband to show mercy. What's certain is this: her compassion created a crisis that threatened everything. When Marpa traveled to teach other students in distant valleys, Dagmema made a decision that would change everything. She climbed to the cave with food, warm clothes, and most dangerously, human kindness. What she found horrified her. This skeletal figure, so weak he could barely lift his head, still sitting in meditation posture with fierce determination burning in his sunken eyes. My husband is testing your resolve, she whispered. But I can see you've endured enough. Surely the Dharma allows for mercy. For the first time in years, MILAREPA felt someone cared whether he lived or died. When Marpa returned from his teaching tour weeks later, he immediately sensed the change. His student's desperate edge had been softened by comfort. Who helped you? He demanded. MILAREPA confessed about Dagmema's visits. What followed wasn't an explosion of shouting, something far more terrifying. Marpa went completely silent. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold as mountain winter. My own wife, undermining everything I've worked to achieve. His farmer's warmth had vanished completely. Do you understand what kindness does to someone trying to transcend ego? Dagmema tried to defend her actions. He's endured enough. Surely the Dharma allows for mercy. Mercy? Marpa's quiet fury was more frightening than any scream. A mass murderer receives exactly what karma provides. Nothing more. Nothing less. The argument that followed threatened to destroy their marriage. Milarepa realized he'd caused this crisis through his weakness, his need for comfort, his inability to face the full weight of what he'd done. There's only one way to resolve this, Marpa declared with finality. Final test, tonight. Either you achieve complete realization, or you die with your karma unresolved. The look in his deep-set eyes suggested death was the more likely outcome. Everything had been leading to this moment. Sit there, Marpa commanded, pointing to an isolated meditation area far from the house, far from any help. Face everything you've done, every person you've killed, every family you've destroyed. Achieve enlightenment tonight or die trying. Milarepa, skeletal and green from years of nettle eating, nodded and sat in meditation posture one final time. In Buddhist thought, karma is inescapable, but it can be transformed. Tonight would determine whether Milarepa could turn the poison of his past into the medicine of awakening. He closed his eyes, went deeper into awareness than ever before, and entered the space where all his guilt lived. At first, the profound stillness he'd learned during 3 years of cave meditation. Then, something shifted in the darkness. The air grew thick as storm clouds. Shadows began moving without any light to cast them. The temperature dropped until his breath became visible mist. A presence materialized that made every survival instinct scream in terror. Massive, eyes like molten metal, fangs that dripped with accumulated darkness. Traditional accounts describe Milarepa facing terrifying demons during his retreats. But imagine, for someone who'd committed mass murder, those demons might have worn the faces of his victims. So, it said in a voice like grinding bones and screaming wind, the killer thinks meditation erases murder. Behind the demon, figures began appearing in the darkness. Wedding guests, children, innocent relatives, people whose lives he'd stolen with supernatural vengeance. You think sitting in caves makes you pure? The demon continued. You think suffering pays for what you've done to us? Terror beyond anything he'd experienced with black magic. This wasn't some meditation vision. This felt real as stone, solid as death itself. The accumulated weight of his karma, manifesting as something that could destroy him completely. For a moment, he almost fled screaming into the night. Then he remembered something the Buddha had once said when facing his own demons. I see you, Mara. I know who you are. Milarepa opened his eyes, looked directly at this manifestation of everything he'd done wrong, and made a choice that would determine whether redemption was real or beautiful lie. He stood up. His skeletal frame shook with exhaustion. His green skin showed every bone. Yet when he spoke, his voice carried strength that surprised even him. You're absolutely right, he said to the demon and the faces of the dead. I am a killer. I did murder innocent people. The demon smiled, sensing victory was within reach. Milarepa took a step forward toward the nightmare. But watch. The demon lunged forward, claws extended like knives, ready to tear apart this skeletal figure who dared face the weight of mass murder. The faces of the dead began screaming for justice, for revenge, for the very blood payment that Milarepa had once demanded for himself. And Milarepa, broken and green from years of suffering, stood at the moment that determines every human life. Can someone who has committed terrible acts truly transform? Or are we forever prisoners of our worst decisions? One day, this broken figure would be called Jetson Milarepa, and his voice would shake mountains with songs of enlightenment that are still sung in Tibetan valleys today. But right now, it trembled before the demons of his past. What happens next determines everything. In part 3, we'll witness the most intense spiritual battle ever recorded, the final test of whether light can truly emerge from the deepest darkness. How many of you have done something you deeply regret, something that made you question whether you could ever be forgiven? Because what MILAREPA does in this moment will challenge everything you think you know about redemption. If you're following this impossible journey from killer to realized master, hit subscribe and stay with us for the conclusion that will redefine how you think about redemption. The ending of MILAREPA's journey is unlike anything you expect, and it's still sung in Tibet 1,000 years later. To be continued in Part 3, The Singing Yogi.